Hi, this is Ramya Ravindran and welcome back to my channel Infinity for UPSC. In the previous chapter, that is in second chapter, we had covered from 7th century to 12th century, and there we had seen about Rashtrakutas, Gurja Pratiharas, Palas, Chahamanas, Cholas, all these things were seen there. Now in this chapter, we are going to cover from 12th century onwards. So as the title suggests, first we need to look at the rulers of Delhi. So who are these Delhi Sultans? So these are the rulers of Delhi and these are the dynasties which ruled Delhi, and the rule started from early 12th century, and the first one to rule was Rajput dynasty. After Rajput we had early Turkish rulers. This is a slave dynasty. All these people are basically slaves. So it is also called as a slave dynasty. Then after slave dynasty we have got Khilji dynasty, then Tughlaq dynasty, Sayyid dynasty and Lodi dynasty. So you need to remember all these dynasties in order, and the rulers also you are supposed to remember in the correct order. But here all rulers are not mentioned, only the important ones are mentioned. So first is Tomas from Rajput dynasty, and here we have got Anangapal, then Chauhans, and here they have mentioned about Prithviraj Chauhan. We had seen about Prithviraj Chauhan in the second chapter, and we saw that he was the one who had defeated Gauri in 1191. But he got defeated in 1192, and we see that he ruled till 1192. And then we have got Kutubuddin Aibak, Iltutmish, Razia Sultan, Ghiyasuddin Balban. So remember all this in order. Then in Khilji dynasty we have got two important rulers. One is Jalaluddin Khilji, second Alauddin Khilji, who was the son-in-law of Jalaluddin Khilji. Then in Tughlaq dynasty we have got Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, Muhammad Tughlaq and Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Then in Sayyid dynasty we have got Khizr Khan. Lodi dynasty we have got Behlul Lodi. So you need to remember the ruler and the dynasty to which the ruler belongs, and you need to remember the order of the rulers. By the end of this chapter we will try to remember some of the important dates as well, but as of now you pause the slide and by heart the dynasties as well as the order of the rulers. Please do that. Now here we have been given three images. One is Iltutmish tomb, second Alai Darwaza, and third Firoz Shah Tughlaq's tomb. But we have not been given any details, but since these images are given in your NCERT book, you will have to go back and find the details about this. So what are the details that you need to search for? First you need to find the location, then who constructed this building, when was it constructed, what were the materials which were used, that is it made of white marble, stone, red sandstone, what is the material that is used. Then is there anything unique about the building? So all these details you are supposed to collect and keep it for your reference. It is required for your art and culture. So anything which is given in your NCERT textbook, anything which is given in your box, anything which is given as images, all those are very important and those have got very high chances of appearing in your prelims exam. So please collect details of these three buildings. Now the name of the chapter is Delhi Sultans. But till now in medieval India we have not seen the reference of Delhi anywhere. Why is that way? We had seen about Kaveri Delta being important for the Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas, and then we had seen about Kannauj, which was important for the Rashtrakutas, Gurja Pratiharas and Palas. But we did not see about Delhi. That is because Delhi became an important city only in the 12th century, and that is what we are going to see in this chapter. We are going to see a time period from 12th century onwards. The chapter starts from early 12th century. Delhi first became the capital of a kingdom under the Tomar Rajputs. So Tomar Rajputs, they were the first people who made Delhi their capital. So Tomar Rajputs, you need to associate with Delhi. Then Tomar Rajputs were defeated in the middle of the 12th century by Chauhans. We had already seen that after Rajputs we have got Chauhans, and these two are the Rajput dynasties. So first Tomar and second Chauhans, and Tomars were defeated by Chauhans in the middle of 12th century. Now in the previous chapter we had seen that Chauhans were ruling the area around Ajmer and Delhi. So that means they were not ruling Delhi. But after defeating the Tomars, they started ruling Delhi, and that is how Delhi became their capital. It was under the Tomars and Chauhans that Delhi became an important commercial center. So whenever a place becomes a capital of a kingdom, that becomes an important commercial center, and that was the case with Delhi as well. Many rich Jaina merchants lived in the city and constructed several temples. Coins minted here called Delhi Wal had a wide circulation. So during 12th century we had seen construction of temples as well by the rich Jaina merchants. And the another term that you need to remember here is Delhi Wal. What is Delhi Wal? It is a coin. It is a name which was given to coins. So the coins minted in Delhi is called as Delhi Wal. So very important, Delhi Wal, this is basically a coin. The transformation of Delhi into a capital that controlled vast areas of the subcontinent started with the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate in the beginning of the 13th century. Now you need to understand that all these dynasties, they do not come under Delhi Sultanate. Delhi Sultanate means the early Turkish rulers, then the Khiljis, Tughlaqs, Sayyid and Lodi dynasties. Only these 5 dynasties come under the Delhi Sultanate and not the Rajput dynasties. So that is why we are referring to a time period from 13th century. From 13th century onwards, they started controlling vast areas and they started doing that from Delhi. And during the time of Tomas and Chauhans, they were not controlling many regions from Delhi. They were just controlling Delhi. But from Aibak onwards, from the time of Qutbuddin Aibak, they started controlling other areas as well. They started capturing other areas and they were controlling all those areas from Delhi. So that is the reason they are saying that they started controlling other areas from Delhi from 13th century onwards. 1206 means 13th century. The Delhi Sultans built many cities in the area that we now know as Delhi. Now these are the important cities and important places in Delhi. So you need to note the order, that is from north to south or south to north. You need to note the order. So here in the south we have got Hauze-e-Sultan, then here Adilabad and Tughlaqabad. So first is Adilabad, then Tughlaqabad. Then Qutub Minar, Old Delhi. This is Old Delhi. Jahanpanah, Siri, Hauze-Khas, and here Firozshah Kotla and Firozabad. So this is the order. So once again the order is Hauze-Sultani, here Adilabad, and then above that Tughlaqabad. Then coming back to this place, above Hauze-Sultani you have got Qutub Minar, Old Delhi, Jahanpanah, Siri, Hauze-Khas, Firozshah Kotla and Firozabad. And here you also need to note that beside Firozabad the river Yamuna is flowing. Now these are basically the selected Sultanate cities of Delhi during 13th and 14th century. Next, finding out about the Delhi Sultans. There are many sources which gives us information about the Delhi Sultans like inscriptions, coins, architectures. All these are providing a lot of information to us, but the most important thing is the history. And this history is called Tarikh or Tawarikh. Tarikh in singular form and Tawarikh in plural form. And this is a Persian language. In Persian you call history as Tarikh and Tawarikh if it is in plural form. And why Persian? Because Persian is the language of administration under the Delhi Sultan, and that is the reason they have used this term which is in Persian. So we have got two information here. One, Tarikh or Tawarikh, this means history, and second, Persian is the language of administration under the Delhi Sultans. So both these pieces of information are very important to us. Tarikh, Tawarikh, history, and Persian, language of administration under the Delhi Sultan. The authors of Tawarikh were learned men like secretaries, administrators, poets and courtiers. That means the people who are sitting in the court. So all these people have got direct access to the information which is happening in court. Now these authors of Tawarikhs, they recount events. That means they write down events, and that is what we call as Tarikh or Tawarikh. Then apart from writing history, they also advise rulers on governance. Very important statement. Apart from writing history, they also advise rulers. So if you get this option, do not think that it is a wrong statement. It is a correct statement. They also advise rulers on governance. Emphasizing the importance of just rule. That means these authors of Tawarikhs, they make sure that the rulers give importance to justice and there is just rule within the kingdom. Then further we get the importance of justice through this writing, and this was written by Fakhr-e-Mudabbir. So he was a person who wrote in 13th century, and he said that a king cannot survive without soldiers and soldier cannot live without salaries, Salaries come from the revenue collected from peasants. We have seen that it is the producers and the traders who pay tax. So basically it is their money on which the kingdom survives. But peasants can pay revenue only when they are prosperous and happy. This happens when the king promotes justice and honest governance. So this shows how everything is related to each other, and ultimately the king can survive only if he promotes justice and honest governance. And this was written by Fakhr-e-Mudabbir in 13th century. And 13th century is the time period when the Delhi Sultanate started. That is from 1206 onwards, and that is what we call as 13th century. Then we have been given some more information about the authors of Tawarik. First, they live in cities, mainly Delhi, and hardly ever in villages. I told you they are writing the events, and if they want to write events, they should be around the king. And that is the reason they live in cities and mainly in Delhi around the king, where everything is taking place, and they need to note down everything so that they can prepare the Tawarik. They often wrote their histories for sultans in the hope of rich reward. Now I have been saying this since ancient history that whenever the court writers are writing something, they are always expecting some reward. And that is the reason they always praise the sultan or praise the ruler. And that also means that historians are not supposed to take it blindly. They should cross-check it with some other source. These authors advised rulers on the need to preserve an ideal social order. So what is this ideal social order? It is something which is based on birthright and gender distinction. Birthright in the sense, somebody who takes birth in a noble family, that person should go on to become something very important. And some other person who takes birth in a very humble family, that person should live a life which is very humble. And that humble person should never be elevated to a high position. So that is the meaning of social order based on birthright. Then gender distinction in the sense, the status of women should always be lower than that of the men. So that is the meaning of gender distinction. Their ideas were not shared by everybody. Obviously, everybody would not be like that, but these people, these authors of Tawariks, they were like that, and these people were the ones who were advising the ruler. So that means even the ruler would be following these things. That is, he would want to preserve an ideal social order based on birthright and gender distinction. Now here we have been given an example of the preservation of an ideal social order based on gender distinction. So in 1236, Sultan Iltutmish's daughter Razia became Sultan. The chronicler of the age, Minhaj-e-Siraj, that means Minhaj-e-Siraj is a contemporary of Sultan Iltutmish and contemporary of Razia Sultan. If you get the statement, it is a correct statement. Minhaj-e-Siraj, he was the contemporary of Sultan Iltutmish as well as Razia Sultan. Both are correct. So this Minhaj-e-Siraj, he recognized that she was more able and qualified than all her brothers. But he was not comfortable at having a queen as a ruler, nor were the nobles happy at her attempts to rule independently. Ultimately, she was removed from the throne in 1240. That means she could rule only for 4 years independently. And there were oppositions from every side, including from Minhaj-e-Siraj, who could recognize that she was very much capable than all her brothers, but still he could not accept the idea that a woman has become a ruler. Minhaj-e-Siraj thought that queen's rule went against the ideal social order created by God, in which women were supposed to be subordinate to men, and that is the reason he could not accept Razia Sultan as their sultan. Now here we have been given the example of 3 queens who had ruled 3 different places during 3 different time periods. One is Razia Sultan, second Queen Rudrama Devi, third Queen Didda. So Razia Sultan, she was the Sultan of Delhi. Rudrama Devi, she belonged to Kakatiya dynasty of Warangal, which is part of modern Andhra Pradesh. Then Queen Didda, she ruled Kashmir. And all these were during 3 different time periods. First was Queen Didda during 980. Then second was Razia Sultan 1236. And third was Queen Rudrama Devi. So you are supposed to remember this order as well. Didda first, second Razia Sultan, and third Rudrama Devi. Now, if you look at the time for which they could rule, Razia Sultan could rule only for 4 years because we saw that she was removed from the throne as the other people were not comfortable at having a queen occupy the throne. So she could rule only for 4 years. But that was not the case with Rudramadevi or with Didda. Didda, she could rule for 23 years from 980 to 1003. So she could rule for 23 years, and Rudramadevi, she could rule for 27 years. But there is one distinction. When Razia and Didda, both of them accepted that they were women and they were occupying the throne as a woman. But Rudramadevi, she pretended that she was a man, and that is how she could rule for 27 years. Here we get to see that on her inscriptions and coins, Razia mentioned that she was the daughter of Sultan Iltutmish. That was in contrast to the Queen Rudramadevi of Kakatiya dynasty. She had changed her name on her inscription and pretended that she was a man. Another queen, Didda, ruled in Kashmir. Her title is interesting because it comes from Didi or elder sister, an obviously affectionate term given to a loved ruler by her subjects. So we get to know one more thing, that Razia Sultan's subjects were not happy with her, nor were the courtiers happy with her. But when we come to Didda, we could see that she was very well accepted by her subjects, and that is the reason she was called as Didi. And she did not pretend to be a man. That means a queen was accepted and loved in Kashmir during 980, and that is the reason how Didda could rule for 23 years. So here there are a lot of things which are important. First of all, Minar-Jai-Siraj, he was the contemporary of Sultan Iltutmish and Razia Sultan, and he was not happy that Razia was ruling the kingdom. Second, this is the order. First is Didda, second Razia, then Rudramadevi. Then Razia and Didda, they did not pretend to be anything else, but Rudramadevi pretended to be a man, and she had ruled the Kakatiya dynasty of Warangal, which is part of modern Andhra Pradesh. Razia, she ruled Delhi. Didda, she ruled Kashmir. Next is 4 stages in the making of a manuscript. We had seen about Tawarik and the authors of Tawarik, which is nothing but writing history. So here they have explained the process. First is preparing the paper, then writing the text, then melting gold to highlight important words and passages. That means even gold was used in writing the text. Fourth is preparing the binding. So these are the stages in making the manuscript, that is writing the Tawariks. And here the important statement is even gold was used to write history by the Delhi Sultans. So that is what you have to take from this slide. From garrison town to empire. What is the meaning of a garrison town? A garrison town means a town where troops are stationed. That means soldiers are protecting this town. So initially they had captured a small town, that's how they started, and that town was protected by troops. And after some time they could build a big empire. In the previous map we had seen some of the cities, some of the important cities of 13th and 14th century. Now these were the cities of Delhi. Now we are going to see apart from Delhi which all cities they could capture, and this was captured during the time of Iltutmish, that is during 13th century. So from this latitude onwards, that is above Gujarat, he started capturing places. They could not occupy anything in the southern part, that is in the Deccan part or in the south, and they could capture only places which are above this region, that is above the Gujarat area. So the important places are Lucknow, Banaras, Awadh, Gwalior, Ranthambore, Ajmer, Deval, Badaun, Delhi we know obviously, Kashi, Hansi, Uch, Multan, Lahore and Kajakot. So these are the important places which were captured by Iltutmish. So note this, only places in northern India and not in Deccan India or southern India. So how could they expand the Delhi Sultanate? We will see that here. In the early 13th century, the control of Delhi Sultans rarely went beyond heavily fortified towns occupied by garrisons. The Sultan seldom controlled the hinterland of the cities. Hinterland in the sense remote areas, that is rural area. So they could only capture cities and not remote areas or rural areas, and that is the reason they were dependent on trade, tribute or plunder for supplies. So if only cities are under their control and villages are not controlled by them, that means they will be dependent on farm products through trade. They will have to be dependent on trade to get their farm products because they are not producing anything or they are not controlling the land which is producing food. Now here they have mentioned why they could not control the remote areas or why they chose not to control the remote areas. Controlling garrison town in distant Bengal and Sindh from Delhi was extremely difficult. Rebellion, war, even bad weather could snap fragile communication routes. Delhi's authority was also challenged by Mongol invasions from Afghanistan and by governors who rebelled at any sign of Sultan's weakness. So here it is said that these rulers decided not to control other land or not to lose their grip over Delhi because if they do so, the governors would overtake Delhi. And there were chances of Mughal invasions from Afghanistan. They were also trying to invade India. And that is the reason they were not ready to leave Delhi and they were protecting Delhi at any cost. The Delhi Sultanate's consolidation occurred during the reign of Ghiyasuddin Balban and further expansion under Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. So these three rulers, they decided to control even remote areas. Ghiyasuddin Balban, Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. So here we have Ghiyasuddin Balban and he was from slave dynasty. So Ghiyasuddin Balban from slave dynasty during the end of 13th century. Then in the Khilji dynasty, Jalaluddin did not do anything. He did not try to control the remote areas, but Alauddin Khilji did so. Then in Tughlaq dynasty, Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, even he did not attempt to control remote areas, but Muhammad Tughlaq did so. So Ghiyasuddin Balban is here, then Alauddin Khilji and then Muhammad Tughlaq. So three rulers from three different dynasties tried to control the remote areas. Now here they have explained how did the expansion take place. There were three steps. First step was controlling the internal frontier. Second was controlling the external frontier. And third is controlling the southern part of the subcontinent, that is South India. The first set of campaigns along the internal frontier of the Sultanate aimed at consolidating the hinterlands of the garrison town. So in the first step, they started controlling the remote areas which were near to these towns, that is the hinterlands of the garrison town. So they just moved a little ahead of town. And for this, forests were cleared in the Ganga Yamuna Doab. Hunter-gatherers and pastoralists, they were expelled from their habitat. Now here we had seen that in the map, they were controlling the Ganga Yamuna region. And here you will have many forests. And what is the speciality of forest? It is very difficult to move through the forest. You cannot take your troops and move through the forest very easily. So if you want to control the remote areas, they will have to clear the forest and only then they will get a bird's eye view, because if there are forests that is blocking their eye view and they cannot protect themselves if there are enemies hiding in the forest. So that is the reason they thought of clearing the forest and removing the people who were staying in the forest, that is the hunter-gatherers. Then these lands were given to peasants and agriculture was encouraged. I have already told you that the tax is paid by the producers. So that is the reason they encourage agriculture so that they get more tax. And apart from these taxes, they have other means of getting money, and that is plundering. First is plundering, and second is if they control a trade route, they can charge money on the people who want to cross through that route. So that is other means of getting money. But the major source is taxes, and the tax is paid by the producers. New fortresses, garrison towns and towns were established to protect trade routes and promote regional trade. I have told you trade is the other means of getting money. The second expansion occurred along the external frontier of the Sultanate. That is, they started controlling other areas which were far away. So that was the external frontier. Then military expeditions into southern India started during the reign of Alauddin Khilji and culminated with Muhammad Tughlaq. In one of the earlier slides, I have told you that there were three rulers who thought of controlling regions apart from Delhi. That was Balban from slave dynasty and Alauddin Khilji from Khilji dynasty, Muhammad Tughlaq from Tughlaq dynasty. But when it comes to South India, there were basically two important rulers who controlled the southern part of India. It started with Alauddin Khilji and ended with Muhammad Tughlaq. Now in between Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq, we just have one important ruler, and that is Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. And here also you might have some less important rulers because the rule lasted till 1320 and Alauddin Khilji he ruled till 1316. That means there were some unimportant rulers who had ruled the Khilji dynasty here. And we do not know whether these people played an important role in controlling the southern part of India. So basically there were two rulers who captured the southern part of India, and that was Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. Then in their campaigns, Sultanate armies captured elephants, horses, slaves and carried away precious metals. So whenever they capture a land, everything from that land is taken away. By the end of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign, 150 years after somewhat humble beginning, the armies of Delhi Sultanate had marched across a large part of the subcontinent. That is, by the end of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign, which is 150 years after the start of Delhi Sultanate. So when was Delhi Sultanate started? 1206. It was 1206 when Qutbuddin Aibak from the slave dynasty established himself as the ruler of Delhi. So approximately 1200 to 1350. So this is the time when Muhammad Tughlaq's reign ended. So 150 years. So within 150 years, they had captured a large part of the subcontinent. They had defeated almost all their rivals and they were acting as administrators. That is, they were collecting taxes and they were dispensing justice. Now the book is asking us how complete and effective was its control over such a vast territory. That is, if they are controlling the entire subcontinent, is that control very effective? Are they really controlling the places, or are they leaving the places to the governors and other people, and are those governors controlling those regions, and the people who are in Delhi, they do not have much control and they do not have much idea about what is taking place there. So is that the case? That is the question which is being asked. Now if the NCERT has asked this question to you, there is a very high chance of this being asked in your UPSC mains exam. So please prepare an answer for this question. Next is Alauddin Khilji's campaign into South India. We had already seen that the campaign into South India started with Alauddin Khilji and it ended with Muhammad Tughlaq. So it started with Alauddin Khilji. So let us see which all areas were attacked by Alauddin Khilji and when did he attack each of those areas. So first of all, the Delhi Sultanate, they were occupying this place, that is Delhi, and from here they attacked Devgiri first. It was attacked in 1296. So Devgiri was captured first and later they attacked Gujarat in 1299. And after that they thought of capturing Chittor and Ranthambore. Now note this, that these two places are nearer to Delhi. But still they thought of attacking Devgiri and Gujarat first and not Chittor and Ranthambore. And that is because these two places were heavily fortified and Rajputs were protecting these two places, and we know the power and strength of Rajputs. So we know that it was very difficult for them to attack Chittor and Ranthambore, and that is the reason they first attacked Devgiri and Gujarat and then later Chittor and Ranthambore. And after that they attacked Mandu in 1305. Then in 1311 he attacked Warangal, Dwarasamudra and Tanjavur. So that means his expedition into south started from 1296 and it ended in 1311. Now if we look at the time period of Alauddin Khilji, we see that he occupied the throne in 1296. That is, the very year he was crowned, he started attacking the places in south, and in 1296 itself he had captured Devgiri. And from there onwards his journey into south began and it continued up to 1311, and we see that he had ruled up to 1316. Now from here onwards we'll see some important constructions, some important masjids made by these rulers. So first of all, what is a masjid? Masjid means a mosque, and masjid, this is an Arabic word, and this is a place where a Muslim prostrates in reverence to Allah. In a congregational mosque, that means Jama Masjid or Masjid-i-Jami, Muslims read their prayers together. So Jama Masjid means the place where Muslims pray together, and prayer is called namaz. Members of the congregation choose the most respected, learned male as their leader, and leader is called imam. So this leader or imam, he does the rituals for prayer. He also delivers the sermon. Sermon means the reading or the learning. That is called khutbah. So sermon means khutbah. during the Friday prayer. During prayer, Muslims stand facing Makkah. In India, this is to the west, and this is called Qibla. So when they stand facing Mecca and pray, that is called Qibla. So here we have got Jama Masjid, which is a congregational mosque. Prayer means namaz. Sermon is khutbah, leader, imam, and when they stand facing Mecca and pray, that is called Qibla. The Delhi Sultans built several mosques in cities all over the subcontinent. These demonstrated their claims to be protectors of Islam and Muslims. So that means these Delhi Sultans, they wanted to claim that they are the ones who are protecting the religion Islam, and they are the ones who are protecting the Muslims all over the subcontinent. Mosque also helped to create a sense of community of believers who shared a belief system and a code of conduct. It was necessary to reinforce this idea of a community because Muslims came from a variety of background. So since Muslims were from different backgrounds, there should be something which is common among all the Muslims, and that is this belief system. And for that, a mosque is very essential, and that is the reason all these Delhi Sultans, they built several mosques across the subcontinent. Now let us have a look at the mosque which are given in your NCERT textbook. Now this is part of your art and culture in your UPSC syllabus, and the questions which are coming from art and culture are increasing every year. So make sure that anything which is given in your NCERT, that is by heart. You need to know every single statement which is given in your NCERT. So here first is Quwwat al-Islam Mosque, and this was built during the last decade of 12th century, that is around 1190. This was the congregational mosque of the first city built by the Delhi Sultans. So Delhi Sultans built this old Delhi first. So old Delhi was the first city which was built by the Delhi Sultan, and this Quwwat al-Islam, this is in old Delhi. So basically it is in Delhi. The minar was built by two sultans, that is Qutbuddin Aibak and Iltutmish. So it was started by Aibak and Iltutmish continued to build it. Then the mosque was enlarged by Iltutmish and Alauddin Khilji. Now if UPSC decides to ask about Quwwat al-Islam Mosque, you need to look at every single word before answering the question. Because if the question is who commenced the making of Quwwat al-Islam Mosque, the answer is Qutbuddin Aibak, because he was the first one to rule, and then came Iltutmish. So who commenced means Qutbuddin Aibak. Then if the question is who built the Quwwat al-Islam Mosque, the answer is Qutbuddin Aibak and Iltutmish, because both these rulers were associated with building this mosque. And if the question is who all were associated with the making of this mosque, then the answer is Qutbuddin Aibak, Iltutmish and Alauddin Khilji, because this is the enlargement of the mosque. And here the mosque was already built and completed. Even if it was not enlarged, it was a complete structure. So who built, in the sense, you will have to write only these two names. And who all were associated means you will have to write all these three names: Aibak, Iltutmish and Khilji. So you need to look at every single word given in your question, and according to that you need to answer the question. The next is Begumpuri Mosque. It was built in the reign of Muhammad Tughlaq, and it was the main mosque of Jahanpanah. Now Jahanpanah, this is the new capital in Delhi of Muhammad Tughlaq. And Jahanpanah, this was also called as the sanctuary of the world. So Jahanpanah, the place where the Begumpuri Mosque is situated. Jahanpanah is the capital of Muhammad Tughlaq. Jahanpanah, it is also the sanctuary of the world. So you need to associate all these keywords with each other. Jahanpanah, Begumpuri Mosque, Muhammad Tughlaq's capital, sanctuary of the world. And this Begumpuri Mosque, it was built during the time of Muhammad Tughlaq. The next is Maut Ki Masjid, and this was built in the reign of Sikandar Lodi by his minister. So Maut Ki Masjid, Sikandar Lodi. Then Mosque of Jamali Kamali, this was built in the late 1520s. So that means early 16th century, Mosque of Jamali Kamali. Now the homework for you is finding the material which was used in building each of these structures. That is, you need to find out whether it is made of marble, red sandstone or rock. So that's all from my side. Please like, share and subscribe this channel, and I'll be back with the next video very soon. Thank you so much.